Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you may be watching this. Welcome back to Starkey Formstead. So, my name is Samantha, and I want to have this conversation with you. As you pop on, hit the like button, drop over in comments, tell me who you are and where you're watching from. So, where were you when 9/11 happened? What were you doing? Drop it in comments. I know what I was doing. I was teaching a first grade classroom in Slaughter Elementary in Slaughter, Louisiana, East Feliciana Parish. And I was very close to a chemical plant, and the sirens went off. And I remember putting all of our students, all of our 6 and 7-year-olds in one classroom and crying as I watched the planes slam into the World Trade Towers because I had been there. I had stood underneath those towers when I was 13, and I will never forget that. But I think for most of us, all these years later, there's so many unanswered questions, so many mysteries. So I have this amazing book I'm going to share. I'm going to do a little reading with you guys. It's called The Killing of Uncle Sam. It was written by Rodney Howard Browne and Paul L. Williams. And folks, it's a lot of great information in this. First off, the mystery concerning the collapse of the Twin Towers, all right? Supposedly, this was supposed to be the worst structural failure in modern history. The official story from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, an agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce, is that the impact of the jetliners produced fires that weakened the structure of the two skyscrapers, resulting in a gravitational collapse. Good morning, Leslie. But the evidence supports a totally different story, all right? Something more akin to a controlled demolition. Good morning, Kelly. All right, so this is what the evidence suggests. 1, the rapid onset of destruction. 2, the constant acceleration at or near free fall of the collapsed floors through parts of the buildings that should have been paths of greatest resistance. Number 3, the eyewitness accounts, including those of 118 members of the New York Fire Department, that they heard and saw explosions. 4, the lateral ejections of multi-ton steel framing flying distance of 600 feet at 60 miles per hour. 5, the mid-air pulverization of 90,000 tons of concrete in large volumes of expanding volcanic-like dust clouds. 6, isolated explosive ejections 20 to 60 stories below the crush zone. And 8, several tons of molten steel iron among the debris, evidence of thermite incendiaries on the steel beams. Neither jet fuel nor office fires can reach temperatures sufficient to melt steel. That's 2,750 degrees Fahrenheit, much less to bring steel to a boiling point. Thermite is a mixture of iron oxide and elemental aluminum that, when ignited, reaches temperatures between 4,000 to 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit and produces aluminum oxide as a byproduct. The presence of this substance among the ruins of 9/11 provided a telltale sign that the collapse of the towers may have been the result of a controlled implosion. So I am curious what you guys think. Do you think these towers were intentionally brought down, or do you think the planes did it? The stand-down order. This is mystery number 2. The U.S. military has spent billions developing stealth aircraft, invisible to radar, that could intercept any air attack on homeland. But on the morning of September 11th, 2001, NORAD was oblivious that 4 jetliners were invading prohibited airspace and headed for central targets, including the Pentagon. Good morning, everybody. Even after the first jetliner crashed into the North Tower at 8:46 a.m., NORAD proved incapable of locating and stopping the second jetliner from crashing into the South Tower at 9:02 a.m. Yet the Northeast Air Defense Sector of NORAD was fully staffed that morning of 9/11. The entire staff, even when placed on high alert, remained oblivious of the third jetliner that crashed into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. and the fourth jetliner. Let's not forget the fourth, which, thanks to heroic passengers, crashed instead in a field while heading towards the White House. Procedures at NORAD were completely abandoned. There were 15 to 20-minute delays in issuing warnings to air traffic controllers. Interceptor planes were not scrambled by NORAD from the bases near the targets, even when it was clear that the jets were headed toward Manhattan and Washington, D.C. And fighter planes that were in the air were not redeployed by NORAD to prevent attacks. So that's a great question, you guys. What is the point of having all this money spent on protecting the homeland when our government, obviously didn't do anything to stop these planes? Okay. So the voice recording of everything that happened by the traffic controllers that day on 9/11 in New York was actually seized by the FAA quality assurance manager, who crushed the tape in his hands and cut it into tiny pieces, which he proceeded to deposit in a different trash container. Kenneth Mead, the FAA Inspector General, said that the destruction of the tape was merely a matter of poor judgment. So you heard me. There was a tape that had all the recordings of air traffic controllers as well as the FFA and NORAD. Instead of releasing that to the public, they destroyed it so it couldn't get out. The stand-down order to NORAD had come from Vice President Dick Cheney, who was safe and secure within a bunker beneath the White House. This fact was confirmed by Norman Mineta, the Secretary of Transportation. Cheney was director of the CFR and former executive of Halliburton, one of America's largest defense contractors, who had given Cheney $34 million signing bonus to serve as George W. Bush's running mate. What accounts for such bizarre action? Why was this crucial tape seized and destroyed? Why had NORAD failed to respond to a prolonged attack in such strategic locations? The answer in part resides from the fact that NORAD had received a stand-down order that its commanders were compelled to obey. The order came from Vice President Dick Cheney, who had already sought shelter from the attacks in a bunker. The missing rubble, mystery number 3. Another mystery lies with the rubble, including the debris from the planes that was removed from ground zero before it could be examined by forensic experts. 185,000 tons of structural steel that should have been subjected to detailed analysis were loaded on trucks and transported to salvage yards in New Jersey, where the steel was cut into fragments for recycling. A substantial amount of this recycled steel was sold at rock bottom price of $120 per ton and shipped to who knows what country bought the steel, out of curiosity. Do y'all know who bought it? Anybody? China. Given that the removal and recycling of World Trade Center steel took place over the objection of the victims' families and others seeking a genuine investigation, many uttered a sigh of relief when news was announced that steel parts of the Twin Towers had been saved from the smelting furnaces. The heaviest of these steel pieces was stored in an 80,000 square foot hangar at John F. Kennedy International Airport. These pieces included some of the base sections of the tower's massive core columns and 13 of the 153 steel trees from the bases of the tower's perimeter walls. Although the hangar, which reportedly held 1/500th of the total debris field, remained off limits to the public, the discovery of the existence of intact pieces of the Twin Towers columns seemed to be good news for independent investigators who wanted to test samples of the steel. However, the locations of these pieces within the towers belied reason for their preservation. The large core column section stood on the tower's foundation, 7 stories below street level, and the perimeter column trees from the lobby level just above street level. This was evident from the facts that 18 people survived in the lower reaches of the North Tower's core and fragments of the perimeter walls of each tower remaining standing after the building collapsed. Okay, everybody has heard about the insider trading mystery, right? Oh, hi, Jimmy. Yeah, Alexandria is a couple hours from where I live. Among the mysteries is the finding that an elite group of Wall Street investors purportedly possessed criminal foreknowledge of 9/11, which permitted them to make a windfall from insider trading. You guys, the stock market in America should be off limits. I'd love to see them totally dismantle the stock market. I know they never will. Okay, I'm not ignorant in that. My concern is the amount of congressmen and senators and politicians who do this as a way to make money. All right. By 2014, one of these trades left an unclaimed gain of $2.5 million. The transaction was the result of put options that were placed on United Airlines stock. Since the planes involved in the 9/11 belonged to United Airlines and American Airlines, the two companies took a major hit as a result of the attacks, with shares of United Airlines dropping from $30 to $17 and American Airlines $29 to $18. Put options are sold in blocks of 100 shares. They give investors the option of selling these shares at a future date at the price set when the options are issued. Thanks to the allowance of these transactions, investors could tie up 100,000 shares of United at $30 and 100,000 shares of American at $29, which the sellers were obliged to buy. When the prices plummeted respectively to $17 and $18 per share, the holders of the options could purchase the shares of the two airlines at the rock bottom price and immediately sell them at the price set when the options were purchased. Do you understand what they're saying? They could purchase them at the cheap price, but sell them for the original price prior to 9/11. The firm, used to purchase the unclaimed gains and put options was Bankers Trust. A.B. Browne, a division of Deutsche Bank, which remained under the control of the House of Rothschild. Bankers Trust, a New York bank, had been established in 1903 by J.P. Morgan. It merged in 1997 with Alex Browne and Sons, an investment bank founded in 1800 to become Bankers Trust. A.B. Browne, Alvin Buzzy Krugard, had been the chairman of Alex Browne and Sons at the time of the merger. After the two banks combined, he became vice president of the new financial conglomerate. His task was to oversee private client relations, a position that brought him in contact with some of the world's richest people, including, allegedly, individuals involved in the heroin market, better known as the CIA. According to Senator Carl Levin, He became a major center for the laundering of drug money. After Bankers Trust, A.B. Browne was sold to Deutsche Bank in 1999. Krogard A, where he became the executive director. Few individuals had greater inside knowledge of covert operations and impending threats than Krogard, and fewer still had closer ties to the international banking community. On September 6, 2001, Bankers Trust A.B. Browne, where Krogard had served as top executive, purchased 95% of the puts on the United Airlines. And on September 10th, as part of the same investment strategy, 115,000 shares of American Airlines. Yeah, I just wanted you guys to know that there's a lot more to this. There are even, and let's kind of really get into this. A lot of people want to blame what happened with 9/11 again on Israel, right? It's everybody's big boogeyman is Israel. But the truth of it is, we had a terrible president at the time who came from an oil family that was looking to enrich himself. And there were so much more involved in that Middle East nonsense than most Americans will ever understand. I have heard that there was gold in the Twin Towers that had been awarded through, the global court system to a gentleman. And the gold was moved the night before 9/11 happened. And after the Twin Towers fell, they proceeded to not pay out because they said the gold melted. All those people were sacrificed where 9/11 is concerned. No, I do not believe that Israel had anything to do with it. Yes, I believe our government knew it was coming and they ignored the signs for several reasons. Just like the Dick Cheney was in, the bunkers under the White House rather than trying to stop planes from hurting American citizens. But then it's also, I want to tell you guys, there were so many chemicals that were released with 9/11, and that's been a huge cover-up too. The EPA, the DEQ, they intentionally would not release to the citizens of New York what they were breathing in. And if you go back and watch some of the stuff that's come out, a lot of those people ended up with issues in their lungs and very aggressive forms of cancer. I do want to share this with you guys real quick, and then I have to go because my husband's going to be home for lunch soon. If you'd like to support our channel, look in the top of comments. But watch this.
Grew up in its aftermath. Unlike most terror attacks since, the attack was extremely low-tech. The terrorists, organized in groups of 4 or 5, boarded planes holding only box cutters. They took the plane hostage, forced the pilot to give up control or killed them, and then piloted the plane into its intended target. It seems like a well-planned, if simple, operation. But there's one thing that still raises some eyebrows. Why did Mohammed Atta travel to Portland, Maine, right before the attack? On September 10th, 2001, Mohammed Atta picked up his fellow hijacker, Abdul Azia Al-Omari, at a hotel in Boston. From there, they drove in a rented car north to Portland, almost 2 hours away. Surveillance footage captured the pair checking into a Portland hotel that evening. They were also seen making ATM withdrawals, browsing the aisles of a local Walmart, and in the parking lot of a nearby Pizza Hut. Some believe Atta was conducting surveillance detection, making sure no one was tailing him. Others think it was a strategic move. Security at Portland's airport might have been lighter than at Boston's. Another theory was that he was planning for last-minute delays or meeting with an unknown accomplice. Whatever the reason, on the morning of September 11th, Atta boarded a flight back to Boston. Once he landed, he received a call from Marwan al-Shihai, another 9/11 hijacker, believed to be the green light for the attacks. Atta would go on to hijack American Airlines Flight 11, crashing it into the North Tower. Despite years of investigation, Atta's trip to Portland remains one of the most mysterious pieces of the 9/11 puzzle. Number 8. One of the scariest things about 9/11 was the uncertainty in the immediate aftermath. Thousands of people died, but very few bodies were found. Almost all the casualties in New York and on the planes were essentially vaporized, with their families desperately seeking any evidence of their loved ones so they could have some degree of closure. Many disappeared without a trace. One was Sneha Ann Phillip, an Indian-American physician who was last seen on September 10th near her home in Lower Manhattan, shopping at a department store. She likely made her purchases and went home, and then no trace of her was ever seen again. Unlike most of the 9/11 victims, there are no reports of her being on site, and no eyewitnesses ever reported seeing her. Her family has reason to believe that she was there. She was a physician, and she might have gone to the World Trade Center to offer medical assistance. But few of the doctors who were on site went into the towers themselves. Instead, they were helping people who were injured after escaping. And while people did die on the ground due to falling debris and fires, those were the bodies most likely to be recovered intact. Multiple investigations by the NYPD and a private investigation commissioned by Phillip's husband turned up nothing, which has led many people to wonder, is everything as it seems? Phillip had a troubled past before the events of 9/11, being fired from her job at Cabrini Medical Center due to tardiness and alcoholism. She complained to police that an intern had groped her during a staff night out. The case would later be dropped, and Phillip was charged with filing a false police report. It seemed like her life was spiraling before the terror attack. Could she have faked her death or died in another way? And it was completely ignored in the chaos of the terror attack. Her family has been suing to have her officially confirmed as a victim of the 9/11 attacks, allowing her to be honored officially. And in 2008, an appeals court gave them their wish, and she was added to the Ground Zero Memorial. That's the legal outcome, but any hard evidence remains painfully hard to come by. And in the immediate aftermath, confusion reigned. Number 7. Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda terror network quickly claimed responsibility for the attacks, and he became the world's public enemy number 1. But he came from a very big family, the son of a billionaire Saudi oil baron who had multiple wives and 50 children, and he was considered the black sheep. Most of his family were jet-setting business people with devoutly Muslim beliefs. They had no affiliation to terror groups and viewed Osama as a disgrace. In 2001, the bin Laden family was spread around the world, including in the United States. It was one of the strangest affairs that took place in the days after the attacks. Flights were grounded for 2 days and strictly regulated after that. And it would be several weeks before one of the most controversial flights to happen in that time was revealed. On September 13th, 12 members of the bin Laden family who were in the U.S. were put on a plane and evacuated back to Saudi Arabia. When this was revealed, it caused some outrage. Why were the relatives of our enemy being evacuated? And many asked, why were they such a priority? This was conspiracy fodder of the highest degree, with some arguing it showed that the government was in on the attacks or at least collaborating with the bin Laden family. But less conspiratorial individuals said that most of the bin Ladens in the country were high school and college students. And besides, money talks. Reportedly, the evacuations were kickstarted when one of bin Laden's brothers sought help from the Saudi embassy. Saudi Arabia had good relations with the Bush administration, thanks to their many oil deals and geopolitical significance. The likely scenario is that they were evacuated for their protection due to fears of reprisals, but it still raised some eyebrows, and the government has been tight-lipped about it ever since. But one figure might be at the center.
I just thought you guys should know that. The things that you don't know, right? And my thing is this. If you remember prior to September 11th, when you went to the airport, you could literally walk in. You could just walk in. I remember my mom and dad took my kids to Disney World, and I went on the plane to take pictures of them before they took off. So I'm just saying, but I do want to tell you this stuff about Saddam Hussein. All right. Guys, I think it's a false flag. On August 2nd, 1990, Saddam Hussein ordered $500,000 Iraqi troops to invade and occupy Kuwait. The reason for the invasion was reasonable. Kuwait, while Iraq was locked up in a deadly war with Iran, had pilfered $2.4 billion in oil from the Ramada oil field, an Iraqi oil field, and still Kuwait Emir Amir Jabbar Ahmad refused to absolve even the interest on the Iraqis' debt to his country. This development posed no threat to U.S. national security, but it jeopardized the interests of the House of Rockefeller and the House of Rothschild, which feared that Hussein would invade Saudi Arabia and absorb the oil fields in the Persian Gulf. These two banking families controlled the world's largest oil companies, including Exxon and BP. They had created Saudi Aramco in the 1930s and remained the largest purchasers of Mid-Eastern oil. This position enabled them to establish oil prices, a position that became threatened when Saddam Hussein's invading army appeared at the Saudi Arabia border. Let me tell you something else. The EPA was created by the Rockefeller family, you guys. So the same Environmental Protection Agency that's supposed to clean up after hydrocarbon explosions was created by oil barons. It's the same thing with the Protected Species Act. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers did that to keep America from using our own natural resources, because they understood that if our government pumped our own oil and things like that, then they couldn't charge crazy amounts of money and become billionaires. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. It says the Reagan administration, under the guidance of George Shultz and other CFR members, had sided with Iraq during the decade-long Iran-Iraq war. It had shelled out billions in agricultural credits and hundreds of millions of dollars in advanced weaponry to Saddam. The weapons were transported to Iraq by circuitous route through Egypt and Saudi Arabia, since the House of Saud was also intent upon ending the reign of the leader in Iran. The United States under Reagan further equipped the Iraqi army with satellite intelligence, supplemented by airborne warning and control systems. I'm just saying, I think that all of this was a setup. I think they did it. It all had to do with money. It had to do with control. It had to do with oil. But it's always much more than what meets the eye. So on this anniversary of September 11th, I just wanted to put into the world's documentary and tell the truth. I wanted people to know in future generations that there was more to this than meets the eye. And the truth will set us free. Love you guys so much. If you'd like to join our channel, even if you donate $1, we'll hook you up with our monthly newsletter and invite you to the Zoom links. You can look at the top of comments. You guys have a blessed day.